listening to the ESQ.Marketing podcast, hosted by Matthew Lauren, president of ESQ.Marketing, where he features successful solo and SMB law firms from all over the United States. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey, I'm Matthew Lauren, president of ESQ.Marketing, and you're listening to the ESQ.Marketing podcast, where I feature successful solo and SMB law firms from all over the United States. This episode is brought to you by ESQ.Marketing. We help law firms generate more clients and cases using search marketing. And today we have a special guest, not a lawyer, but Lars Daniel. Lars is a practice leader of digital forensics at Envista Forensics. Lars is a qualified expert witness in the field of digital forensics and has testified in both state and federal courts. Lars is also the co-author of the book, Digital Forensics for Legal Professionals, Understanding Digital Evidence from the Warrant to the Courtroom, published by, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, Synges? Is that right, Lars?
Singerist, yeah, it's an imprint of Elsevier, so you're close.
Imprint of Elsevier Publishing. And Lars, thank you for being with us on the show today.
Oh, my pleasure, absolutely.
I've heard of Elsevier Publishing, but I've never heard of that imprint before. So I've heard a lot about you, our director of marketing.
That's where they put all the nerd books. So the Stingerist is all the digital forensics and stuff like that. That's what, Elsevier doesn't want that mixed in with the rest of their brands, so they push it over to Stingerist, I think. I'm just joking, but yeah.
I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit. It sounds like super interesting stuff, and I've read some of your stories passed along to me by your acquaintance, and interesting stuff. So I'll just jump right in here. For our listeners who are not familiar in the field of digital forensics, can you tell us what it encompasses?
Yeah, absolutely. So digital forensics is the umbrella terminology we use for subdisciplines inside of it. So inside of digital forensics, you would have things like computer forensics, cell phone forensics, cell phone location analysis, and other types of location forensics, GPS forensics, and in-vehicle infotainment and telematics systems. So in other words, if it gets electricity and stores data in some fashion, it's likely that it falls within the realm of digital forensics as far as the experts who would examine it to find forensic artifacts on that and then prepare that as a report and then could testify to it.
So in some of those shows like CSI or shows like that, you always see the digital forensics people. That's you, right? Behind the scenes doing that, doing the heavy lifting.
It's sort of us. Yeah, it's a lot more fun as far as the colors in the rooms and how fast it goes is nice. I remember one time filming for a news station, and they were talking about a case, and they came in. They brought all these extra lights because they came into our offices, and it looks just like a normal office, right? Or in some of our offices where you sit down, it looks like a law firm more than it looks like a
Sure.
lab. So they turn all these red and blue lights, and they turn all the lights off to make it look like CSI, so they could get their shots for the news. It was pretty entertaining.
That's awesome. So Lars, how did you get started in the world of digital forensics?
Yeah, that's a good question. So by accident is how I got started in it. Never intended to do this. So growing up, my father is a serial entrepreneur, had all kinds of different companies. He worked in building automation controls to fiber optics. Then he owned IT companies and computer stores. And I worked for him for a long time. Went through college, went to graduate school, trying to get a degree in philosophy of all things. And he needed help because he was doing so well. So I came back and worked for nothing for a while. And then 8 years later, Envista Forensics came along and acquired our company. And here we are today. Been doing this for a total of 12 years now. So it was a family business. We wrote some books, got a bunch of certifications, and did the other stuff normally you would do to market a business and grow it. And then we were purchased. But that's the short of it.
That's an amazing story. Really cool that you got to work for your father.
Yeah, he still works with us too. So that's great. He's a senior principal consultant here. He's testified over 70 times in state and federal court. So he's a bit of a legend in the digital forensics community.
Very cool. So I've heard a couple of stories about your work that are pretty interesting. One about kidnappers, bottle service, and mobile phone forensics. Are you able to tell me that one?
Yeah, sure. We can do that one. So this is a case that one of our examiners did, and it's pretty interesting. You don't think about location forensics always being utilized in a fashion like this, or if you do, you think murder cases or sex crimes, right? Did they have the bracelet on? Did they go somewhere they shouldn't? But it all comes together and is utilized in civil litigation too. And this is one such example of that. And in this case, we get a call from the attorney, right? And there's concern that an employee has jeopardized the company's reputation. That's where it starts off. That's what we think the issue is. Yeah, it's an interesting story. The employee told us this is what happened after a business brought us on to examine this. And so what he was saying is that he was on an international business trip, right? He'd been working hard all week, and he wanted to go let off some steam. So he went to explore the city, pretty normal stuff like that. The next morning, he boards the plane and returns to the United States. But a week passes, and when he comes back, accounting notices that there's 5+ figures racked up on his company credit card, right? So a lot of money has been spent, and it's all accrued on like a single night. So it all happens in the span of a very short period of time. Now, remember and note that this employee says nothing to his boss. He hasn't mentioned anything at all about these charges. So when he is questioned finally by accounting and so forth, he recounts this experience like something out of an action movie where he is kidnapped for over 6 hours and held in a room. He's locked up, he's tied up and can't do anything. Obviously, there's some suspicion from the company. Really, and the main reason there's suspicion is that he claims that the card was just compromised and not stolen because it's still in the employee's possession, which is interesting anyway. If you kidnap somebody, why not just pick the card too, right? And second, he never reported this to international authorities or to anyone stateside when he got back. So it's just out of nowhere, you have this story. So they ask us to come look at the iPhone and so forth, look at his location data. And when we look at this phone, we see a few things. First of all, we notice that there were applications deleted on the phone contemporaneous to around the time when he's allegedly kidnapped. And as we look at this data, we find a few things. One, the Apple Watch data that is recorded on the Apple Watch where you're walking around and going upstairs and stuff like that, that's dumped to the phone and it's saved in the health application. So we can see where you're walking and the distance, and if you're going upstairs, direction changes, location information is all on the phone that we can get through forensic analysis. And there's miles walked in this period of time where he is supposed to be tied up. That's the first issue. The other application that was deleted that we recovered was the translator application. And we recovered a deleted text message. And this deleted text message goes something like this. Last night was amazing, and I can't believe you can't find a man. Someday someone will find you and it will end up perfectly. You're so beautiful. You're perfect by American standards. Words can't express how much I miss you. Normal stuff like that.
Oh, it sounds normal.
So yeah, we found all this out, and what happened is that message was sent while he's boarding a plane to come back to the United States too. So as you can tell, it was a good outcome for the company in this situation, just because he did go out and have some extracurricular activities one night and then tried to come up with a nice fanciful story, but it certainly is entertaining.
Very incriminating. Yeah, geez. So was that case ever in court, or was that like a private company that hired you to figure that out?
Yeah, so I can't share everything about that, but that was a private company that retained us for that through counsel to examine that one. So yeah, that one never went to court.
Okay, gotcha. So a lot of our audience are personal injury attorneys, divorce attorneys. Do you have any interesting stories around that, especially around maybe like the divorce or family law one?
Yeah, sure. One of the biggest issues we see in family law in particular, this really goes across the board, but it really is a big issue in family law, is verifying text message evidence. And here's what I say about that. So when I'm doing a forensic examination, or a forensic expert we have tools where we can make a forensic copy called a forensic acquisition. And once we have that copy, we can run an algorithm against it that gives it a mathematical number, a digital fingerprint, right? This is the digital DNA. So I have a perfect snapshot in time of how that data exists. I can validate it. I can say it's real, all that other stuff. What you see most often in court as evidence, especially in family law and these other areas of text messages, are pictures of text messages, right? You take a screenshot or a picture of a message someone sent you, and then you give that to your attorney, or you supply that in discovery. That's the problem. And the problem is that constitutes what's called a manual examination. which I could talk about in a second. But here's the real issue. You can fake those messages. You can spoof messages. You can fake messages to make them look absolutely real. I've testified a number of times about this. I've written about this, written affidavits about this. We've discovered this as actually faked messages multiple times in cases. It's a real problem today.
That's crazy. How do people do that? Is it?
Yeah, you can literally go to a website. You can search for make a fake text message, and it will bring you up to websites where you can put in who it's from, who it's to, what you want the message to say, your battery life, the carrier, the number of bars of service that you have, and then you hit done, and you can download a picture that looks exactly like a real screenshot. You can set the time. That's one method. There's a whole lot of other methods. I have a little guide I give out on how that's done, but there's many methods, and they don't require a high level of technical sophistication. A normal person can do this.
Dude, that's so crazy. So how do you figure out what's real and what's not? Is it possible?
Yeah, it is possible. One, if that is supplied in discovery, then you have to go do an examination of the phone it came from or it was sent to. Preferably the sending phone's the best source because that evidence should exist there. And also, if it's a particular type of message, a normal text message, which is SMS or short message service. So if you have an iPhone and it comes across as green, that's an SMS. If it's blue, that's iMessage, for example. They're different types of messaging, but those will show up in call detail reports, or kind of like a super phone bill you can subpoena that we have language for that we also give out if anyone needs it. And in that, it will show a transaction of a text message being sent one direction or the other. That would be one way you would determine it, because if it exists in the call detail reports, something was really sent at that date and time. You correlate it back to date on the phone. In other words, much more holistically. Now, to save the headache, if an attorney who's listening to this, one of your attorneys who handles injury law, just needs a text message and doesn't want to call an expert, here's what you do. You take that phone out, you set it on a table, and make sure you put it in airplane mode and stuff like that, because that's just, you should. So it's not getting any new data while you're doing your pictures. And take pictures with a separate camera of that phone, of the message or whatever you want to document. And the entire time, while you're taking those pictures, you have a video camera over your shoulder recording the whole process from the time you power it on, do your examination, power it off, and put the phone away. That's your verification that you didn't change anything or create anything or delete anything. And that's exactly what we would do. We just have fancier tools to do it.
Interesting. Very interesting. That's a great tip. Are there any criminal law cases you've worked on where there's some interesting stories?
Yeah, there's some interesting stories, some interesting cases. I had the opportunity to work on the Dylan Roof case. That's the Charleston church shooter. If you remember that, for the defense.
Yeah,
that was a fascinating case to work on. Had the opportunity to work on the James Holmes theater shooter case. If you remember that one as well, that was the Batman movie out in Colorado.
Yes, that was in Colorado. Tell me about that one. Because that made a lot of headlines. The Colorado shooting one.
Yeah, I don't know how much I can tell about that one. We did work on it. The parts that we did on that one mostly, and this is what happens in a lot of criminal cases, and I give the general outline of what we did, is that there's not a question if there's going to be some kind of big smoking gun found on a computer or a phone in a case like that. We're not out there trying to find some evidence of innocence, and the attorney's not either, right? It doesn't make any sense for the theory of the case that they have or for the actual events that occurred, right?
Because they already know who did it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a theater shooting. They get them on the scene. So, but here's what we do, right? We can pull a lot of information from the computers in the phones that are relevant to mental health experts and other people who analyze that data and can utilize it to make their opinions. So we're an intermediary in a case like that a lot of times, similar to the Dylan Roof case. We did other stuff in that one too. But we're pulling information related to what are they interested in? What are they searching for? What are they reading? And we're putting it into a format that can be utilized by an expert who's not a tech person, right? So we get those documents, we make them like a real document so that your mental health expert could review that for their expert reports. So we're pulling that information. As you know, if you look into somebody's computer, or you look into their phone, a lot of times you're kind of looking into their brain these days.
How far back do you go on something like that?
In a case like that, you go back as far as you can, like as much data is there. how far back we go really is going to depend on the type of case and what you're looking for. If we're looking for something related to a lifestyle analysis, right? Does this doctor go out every weekend and is hookers and cocaine every weekend? Are they doing that? And we can show that through location activity and other stuff. And then there's a malpractice issue. That's relevant, right? A long time. If this is an accident, a vehicle accident case, may only care about distraction on the cell phone. Were they looking at a movie? Were they attaching a Bluetooth? Were they typing a message? Is it in the drafts or whatever? Because we can see all that usually down to the second what's occurring on a phone with an accident. So what do we need? 15 minutes before and after the accident. That's usually what parties would agree to on both sides anyway. So it's not a big span of data that we're looking at.
In the personal injury realm, is there any cases that stick out to you there that have been really memorable in some way?
Yeah, there definitely are. Really, what's fascinating and what's really useful today is just the amount of information available on social media and on phones. And what a lot of times people forget is that even though someone may delete, say, their Facebook profile, and it's gone then, right? It's gone. But those fragments or that data or a lot of really pertinent data related to that Facebook profile still exist on other data repositories. And what I mean by that is that they're going to exist on the computers, on your phones. And even if you've deleted the profile, there's fragments and pieces of all that data in your storage areas on those devices that can be recovered. So a couple real quick, and in these two cases, we do plaintiff defense. We're independent experts who work for whoever decides to hire us. But these were both for the defense. And on one, a gentleman was supposedly had a traumatic brain injury and was able to see lights and loud sounds and stuff. Examined his phone and recovered deleted videos and the rest, including geolocation data of Vegas, living the dream from the videos with lots of bright lights and sounds and other fun activities.
Yeah.
And the second one was a very similar story. The same thing, can't work, traumatic brain injury, but they're at Disney World and there's roller coasters and the whole thing. So that type of information is pretty common in those types of cases.
Is there any case where that you've had that it was just really difficult to piece together a story or a timeline of what happened because the person was kind of aware of they were being tracked?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most complicated cases that I've had that I can talk about was a gentleman who worked inside an IT department at a company. And he left the company very disgruntled, but he also stole a bunch of intellectual property from that company to the point that federal marshals ended up getting involved, trying to track this guy down because he was running. While he was doing that, he somehow managed to get back into the business and attached to it, like walked right in and hooked a USB stick and started sucking down data and putting stuff on their servers you don't want on there. But what actually happened at the end of the day, and because the marshals ended up getting him, but we recovered these artifacts from his system showing that these messages back and forth, he's on Craigslist trying to get people to pay them cash to sign an affidavit for a name change. So he's trying to get a name change and a new passport to get out of the country. So he's working on getting new documents with this intellectual property, this data, probably to go try to sell it. I don't know. So pretty weird scenario.
Very weird. That's super crazy.
And this is at a location with like armed security that escorts you around the building. So how he got in, I don't know. This isn't a slouch like normal office. This is a pretty serious IP that this company had. Yeah.
An attorney gets a phone from a client. What should they do?
Yeah, if you get a phone from a client, the best thing to do, if we'll talk about it from two ways. One, you're going to get an expert probably, and two, you're not. Okay. Either way, you receive that phone into your custody. You want to make sure it's not connected to any networks. Okay. If it's connected to a network, two things can happen. When I say a network, I mean a Wi-Fi network or a wireless network, or a cellular network. Obviously, the cellular network, we understand you put it in airplane mode, that turns it off. However, Wi-Fi can be on, even though cellular's off, because you can connect to Wi-Fi on a plane, right? So that allows it to send and receive data, make calls, everything else. We don't want anything new getting in. We want to keep that data exactly as it is, as when it's taken into your possession. So make sure it's in airplane mode and that wireless connectivity is turned off, okay? That's step one. Step two, the best thing you can do is power it off. Just turn it off and store it away until such a time where you need to get something from that phone. or you're going to provide it to an expert. If you're going to provide it to an expert, you simply give it to the expert and they take care of it from there. Okay. If you're going to try to capture something from it yourself, what you would do is that, just like we mentioned, the only option available to you is a manual examination. That's the camera and the video camera. That's all you got. You don't have any tools that you can utilize that are forensically sound unless you go buy them. So really, that's what you're left with. So what I suggest is store it like I just mentioned, and then proceed to do your manual examination, capture whatever data that you need. And then once again, when you're finished, leave it with airplane mode on. And so the wireless connectivities, all the connectivities are off, powered off, and put it back into secure storage.
Those are great tips. What about social media profiles? What if a social media profile, an attorney knows that that's going to be a crucial piece of evidence to a case? In that case, what should they do? What should they tell their clients to be doing if they know they need to save data there?
Sure, absolutely. So whether it's Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, most of these applications have an ability where you can download your own data. So for example, with Facebook, you go to the top right, and there's a little upside down arrow. You click on that, and you go to settings, and then in settings, you can go through some different steps to download your own data. And you can find a guide for that right on Facebook on how to get that information. And it will package everything that you have into a little web page and send it to you. That's the best way to collect your own data. Now, if you have a scenario where you're trying to gather information about a person who's not your client, you can't do that, right? You can't download someone else's information like that. The best thing to do is to utilize a tool similar like we have. We have some applications, forensic applications, that allow us to point this tool at a social media account for a person or all their social media accounts. And what it does is every time something new is created by that person, it sucks it down into a forensic file, and it mathematically hashes each and every individual entry. So there's no way you can say that this is fake. It's absolutely real. It's time-stamped and it's automatic. So we set it and forget it. We walk away, and it's just pulling down all that data as they generate new stuff. So you don't have to be checking it at 2 a.m. or whatever to see if they posted about riding their bicycle again when they're supposed to have a broke leg or whatever. That's what that's really valuable for.
Wow. That's crazy. I'm going to think about this every time I'm using my social media accounts now or my phone.
Right.
So is there any instance where people aren't being tracked really in today's world, if they're using cell phones, if they're using social media, computers?
Yeah, that's a big question. No, not really. I mean, if you have a modern smartphone, and this is the reality with all technology, you have a spectrum. On one side, you have security, and the other side, you have convenience. The more secure you make anything, the less convenient it is, therefore the less fun. Everything that's fun on your phone requires access to your data, and it requires access to your location data in particular. That's how it can tell you if the gym is really busy right now. Maybe you want to go later, or it can give you estimates on how long it'll take to get to a location as it needs your location data. So here's the issue. Location data is on your phone. Yes, you're absolutely being tracked by applications. We can pull that from the phone. But even if you have location services turned off, you're still being tracked by the cellular system. And that can be gathered via your call detail reports. You get those via subpoena. They're like a super phone bill. And when you can get that, you can track where they were based upon the towers they connected to historically. Other than that, there's also Google Location Services, which is tracking your location or Google Location History. So there's more ways than we have time in this podcast to explain how devices are tracking us. We're not even into wearable technology yet, or there's medical ingestibles that you certain yourself that are doing all this other stuff to see if you took your medicine. I mean, the amount that is tracked about people is only increasing.
That's something that just came to mind. So if an attorney's got a client where maybe all of this technology is going to be useful in the case, what types of things besides their phone should they be asking them to hand over, and maybe they can document?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is going to depend on the type of case. Obviously, laptop computers, phones, those are primarily what you need. Every now and then, we'll want the wearable device, so the watch or the Garmin or whatever, if it's wearable technology, that's potentially of interest. But here's the main thing to remember. Your wearable technology, like your smartwatches, yeah, we can get some stuff from that, but it's pretty small compared to what you can get from the phone. these watches and other devices, heart rate monitors, cranks that go on shafts of bikes to measure wattage, whatever. They're really fancy sensors. And what a fancy sensor does, like in today's world with the Internet of Things, is that it collects data and then it can transmit that data, but it has a really small capacity to transmit data and has a small capacity to store data and to process data. So what does that mean? Your watch may gather a bunch of stuff, but it dumps it to your phone. So we can get that from the phone, or we can get that from the computer, or we can get that from the online account associated with your Garmin Fenix 5X watch or your Apple Watch.
So they may not be as crucial because it's all going to the phone anyway.
Yeah, it's not as crucial. I'd still get it, or I'd still maintain it just in case. The interesting thing about digital forensics is that unlike other disciplines like DNA or fingerprints, while the means you utilize to examine that evidence may change, the evidence itself stays the same. In digital forensics, the tools to examine stuff and the evidence itself is changing constantly, right? Because technology is moving at a breakneck pace, and we're right behind them, keeping up, trying to be able to exploit that technology to get data from it. So while that watch may not be of interest today, it could very much be of interest 6 months from now when some new technique is developed to get or extract a unique type of data artifact from it.
Gotcha. Lars, you're writing some books, and is it the one you have published so far?
Two published. The main one for attorneys right now is the Digital Forensics for Legal Professionals book. I have a series of books coming out soon. The one will be coming out later this year, and that is the Attorney's Field Guide to Digital Evidence, mobile phones. So that will be a whole series, and the first one's on mobile phones, and the next one to come out will be just on location forensics. And these books are designed for attorneys. So it's plain language explaining different types of acquisitions. It's got what a cell phone protocol should look like. It's got language in it, motions, orders, subpoena language for cell phone evidence, and a whole bunch of other stuff like that.
And are these meant to be reference guides that they can like keep on their desk, and when they have a question, they kind of just go through it and mark pages? And
exactly. A reference guide is one, and two also is like a primer or an overview. But really, these books, what I wanted to do with these is, you've got a case, you got a piece of information coming from the opposing side where they've got an expert. I can sniff test what I'm hearing to see if it's real, one. And two, this has got what I need in this book to help me get the evidence I need. So how do I ask for a call detail record so I get it exactly as I need it from Verizon? Or how do I ask for that phone to be properly preserved so when I get it, it's good? That type of stuff.
That sounds like really great information, and probably save them a ton of time from calling experts just to get that exact same, line about what they need to do. You've been listening to Lars Daniel, practice leader at Envista Forensics. Lars, where can people go to learn more about Envista Forensics and your services?
Yeah, absolutely. Envista Forensics is just envistaforensics.com. That's ENVISTA. And then I'm also on LinkedIn, Lars Daniel. You can find me on there. We'll be happy to connect. Really appreciate the time today. I look forward to hearing from anybody. If you have any questions or need any of that stuff we talked about, once again, I'm happy to give out different types of language and stuff for free. Just shoot me an email or an in-message on LinkedIn.
Thanks, Lars. Appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the ESQ.Marketing Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.